cap it.
Yeah, all you need to do, Dick, is go into the settings and you can change the time that it times out and extend it.
Oh, I have to do that.
Okay, Jeff, we're ready to go. We're live.
Is that, I haven't seen this before, but it says the meeting's being live streamed. It looks like you got to click on got it or leave meeting.
You have to, it's I think a new feature of, well, I think I've seen it on Teams and I know it's on Zoom so that everybody knows that it's being recorded.
All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It'll be our regular meeting, November 11th. Happy Veterans Day and thank all the veterans. Let's go ahead and get started. We've got a quorum. We can conduct business. I think we've got everybody.
Yes.
We do have a busy day today. Carl needs to leave about 12:30. So what I thought we would do is we'll take a break this morning when the timing is good. And then we'll push through till 12:30 because that's about the time Carl has to leave to try to get him in on most of the discussion as we can. And then we'll just go from there. So we don't have a public comment period.
Well, we have one. It's just we have no public comment.
Gotcha. Minutes of previous meetings. We've got the October 14th minutes in front of us. Is there any changes or corrections? If not, can I get a motion to accept them?
Couple corrections, minor. So the first is that in the minutes, it's the Rural Energy for America, not Rural Energy for Energy grant. And then the second is just a spelling thing. Let me find it and give me a second. COVID update management considering lessening restrictions. Lessening is spelled with an E and not an O-N.
Anything else, Kristen?
Nope.
Anybody got anything else? Any other corrections?
Move to approve.
Thanks, Liz. We got a motion by Liz and a second by Mr. Volt. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Attorney's report. Welcome, Bryson.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, everyone. Nothing to report.
Nothing happening in Sterling?
Just the same stuff that always happens.
You mean the wind's blowing?
The wind is blowing, that's right. And we have a bunch of new wind towers out here to capture it too.
Any questions for Bryson?
Nothing in, for me, I might have one for executive session.
Okay, perfect. Anybody else? Looks like you're off the hook, Bryson.
All righty, thank you.
Okay, just a few things to go through. Our community solar, we got an initial draft from ISI. Levi reviewed it, then he and I spent a couple of hours going through it. It contains all of the things that we wanted, the pricing as we negotiated, as well as the requested performance guarantee. Now, they had a slightly different way of calculating the performance guarantee. We have changed that back to what we agreed to with them. And we made some other modifications to it. And it was mostly because they started as a basis with the CoBank draft. And the CoBank lease is different because of the ownership structure of the stuff. So we made some changes. We sent that back to them Monday, I believe. And we expect to have everything hopefully signed before the end of November. And then based on that, they will purchase the necessary equipment and be ready to move forward with it. A side note, Fraser did sign an agreement with them to build a 225 kilowatt solar close to the water wastewater facility. We had put them together and helped them with that. And so they will be doing that as a Electrify Everything project. And Snow Mountain, we're still working with them. They were waiting until we finalized our agreement because I think they don't necessarily have the expertise to make sure that everything is in there that needs to be in there. So after we finalize ours, we will work with them to make sure that their agreement is what they need it to be. Moving on to the fiber, our fiber contractor, ADB, is continuing to hang aerial fiber. You might see them around. We expect that 90% of the underground fiber is done, and the remaining aerial fiber will be done in the next few months, may go into January. Phase 1 should be completed by the end of May, and part of that is the remaining 10% of the underground. They had to stop once the county put the moratorium on. They can't dig and drill. So that will be done next year as soon as we can. And we are looking at the potential for some of the aerial fiber to maybe be undergrounded using FEMA mitigation funds, but we're still working with FEMA on that. We meet with Connexon every 2 weeks as the project manager of this project. And I had a call after that meeting with one of their executives and asked them where they are at as it relates to interest in utilizing the backbone to provide other services to our members. And I now have a call scheduled for Monday to talk with Jonathan, their president, to figure out where they are. As you recall, when we signed agreements to start this project, we had a number of agreements. We've signed just the agreements related to the backbone, and any other services such as fiber to the home. Those agreements are there. They have not been fully negotiated or vetted, and that's the discussion that we will have on Monday. And assuming that they do have the interest, which I believe they do, we'll start to negotiate their use of the backbone to provide other services to our members. I will pause for a minute to see if anybody has any questions on either of the first two. Seeing nothing, we will move on. The Winter Park land.
Mark,
Yes, Carl.
your comment on the Snow Mountain Ranch, personnel helping them because they don't have the expertise, does that include legal?
No, it does not. Basically, their project is an electrify everything project. One of the things that we want to ensure is that they have similar performance guarantees in their contract. And so it is basically making sure that they have language in their contract to make the project that they build as successful for them as we want it to be.
Thank you.
Okay. We discussed last month the Winter Park land and an issue that was raised by one of the neighbors related to the land. Levi sent a letter to the prospective buyer and notified them of that potential issue, which we did not have any knowledge that there was or wasn't an issue, but we did notify the buyer. The buyer came back and requested a 3-week extension of the due diligence period to conduct additional testing, which we are about, I think at the end of this week, we'll be 2 weeks into that 3. They have given us some preliminary information. We're waiting for their final report related to that particular issue. And we expect that based on the extension of the due diligence period, that the closing will be mid-December. If there are specific questions about what the issue is or how we're handling it, I would suggest we have those discussions in executive session. I don't see any major issues right now with the process. We're continuing to move forward, and they seem to still have a strong interest in the property. So, any questions on that? Okay, move on to the Ferc settlement. I participated in the most recent settlement conference, which was November the 4th. The primary topic of discussion was the Ferc order that was issued on October 29th. And it was quite an interesting settlement conference. It was much shorter than the previous ones. And Part of it was related to that order. As I think most of you know, I've sent out information. The order accepted Tri-State's modified contract termination payment methodology, suspended the tariff provisions, and instituted a 206 hearing, which is basically a hearing to discuss what the methodology actually needs to be and how it might be modified, or if they will go through and prove it as is. On November the 2nd, the Chief Administrative Law Judge issued an order assigning an ALJ to this particular hearing, requiring the hearing to be scheduled on or before March 17th, and that an initial decision would be issued by May 26th. So it appears that it will move relatively quickly. Based on that Chief ALJ order, the ALJ in this case issued a subsequent order establishing a pre-hearing conference on November 22nd, so a week from this coming Monday. A pre-hearing conference is where all the parties get together, they agree on a schedule for the hearing, they agree on rules related to testimony and timing of testimony, whether it be direct testimony, reply testimony, or responsive testimony to the reply testimony. They agree on a discovery timeline, and then also a timeline for motions that may be filed in the hearing. So that will be interesting to see how that goes. As I notified the board, I did file for Mountain Parks to intervene in the proceeding and subscribe to the docket so that we will get copies of everything. Our intervention does not require us to do anything, but it allows us to more closely monitor the activities in the process. And one of the issues which we have talked about previously is that Levi is not able to represent us. Kristen did provide me with some names of some attorneys, and we are looking at those, and we're looking at another one. I would suggest that well, we can talk a little bit more about this in executive session, but the level of involvement that we want to have, we did put money into the budget for legal services, but full participation in something like this to get us through the hearing could cost us up to $250,000. And I don't think that we have either the inclination or the finances to spend that kind of money on it. And I think we can get most of what we would need out of it with limited participation, and basically let the big dogs fight it out and pay the big bills. So I will pause there to see if anybody has any questions on those items. Seeing and hearing none, I will move on to the next thing. Stacy and I have been meeting with financial institutions regarding deposit and merchant card services. Historically, we have been able to negotiate with our current provider, and they are one of them that we are talking with, to lower our service fees and to generate interest off of the money that we have on deposit to offset those fees. And in some cases, we are able to offset them completely. With the current low interest rate environment, we are seeing that that is not happening, and that our fees have actually gone up a little bit. So we're looking at ways that we may tweak that a little bit to get us back to a point where we are able to offset more of those fees and still maintain federal insurance for all of the money that we have on deposit. All of the organizations that we're talking with, we talked to one on Monday, today's Thursday. So one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and we've got another conversation tomorrow. They all have programs that allow us to take the money that we have, utilize a sweep program to use it to deposit the money at other institutions and stay under the $250,000 at each institution, so all of the money is federally insured. There is a cost to doing that, and that's part of what we are working on at this point. We're still kind of in the beginning stages of this, and any change would probably not be made until next year because it takes probably at least 8 to 12 weeks to move everything from, if we were to move from our current provider to another provider. It obviously is much easier if we were able to work something out with the current provider of services and get what we need out of that. Stacy and I have also been working with 2 lenders to explore the possibility of buying out of RUS. We looked at that once before. You may recall it was a fairly substantial penalty to buy out. With the current interest rate environment, some things it works for you, others it doesn't. In this particular case, it does, because the buyout penalty is less than half of what it was initially quoted to us about 1.5 years ago. And so it's a particularly good time to look at doing this. What we have asked the lenders to do is to structure the debt in such a way so that it matches the maturity of the current RUS debt. And what that allows us to do is have 15, 20, 25, and 30-year maturities and take advantage of lower interest rates for the maturities that we have. And by doing that, we can potentially either break even or maybe even save some money. We're still reviewing the proposals. One of the big challenges for us is the matching of cash flows in the early years, because you potentially have a little bit more principal but that you pay in the early years. You save a lot more interest in the later years. And so we're looking at that. And after we have had some more discussions with the potential lenders, we will come back to the board with a proposal. One of the things that this also did is that RUS, when we asked them for the buyout number, they did have some conversations with us about ways that they can be more user-friendly and changes that they could potentially make that would allow us to remain with them. And so we have not made any decisions at this point. We're just looking at possibilities, because we do believe that there is the ability to save money over a 20 or 30-year period of time. So I will pause one more time to see if there are any questions on the bank change or the potential RUS buyout.
Mark, I had a question on RUS's buyout. Wasn't there something either in pending or proposed legislation that was trying to get rid of the prepayment penalties with RUS? I remember, and I don't know, there have been so many changes in what's been proposed, but I believe there was something out there that somebody was trying to get them to do away with some of the prepayment penalties.
I know that there have been a number of discussions around interest rates and that type of thing, and that obviously would affect the prepayment. It was supposed to be in one of the legislative infrastructure bills. I don't believe it was in the one that actually passed. And but we will take a look at that to see if that is something that we need to consider.
Okay, yeah, I think Dick, I think you're right. NRECA had it in, that was in that little wrap up. They continue to work to try to get RUS to allow co-ops to refinance at reduce the interest rate that people are paying if it's less than what they're paying now. So. Right.
It was something about the prepayment penalty that I remember in that wrap up that they gave us. And I just thought that if they're working towards that, it might be, it might help us going forward. I don't know whether we have to do it right away, maybe taking a little slower time, because if that comes through, that saves you a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of what has to be considered once you guys have your answers back. And I mean, the bill, who knows what will end up in that bill and if that bill will go through. But if it does, then we'll have another thing to evaluate against.
And there is another consideration that we will discuss in executive session related to one of the items that is listed under the executive session. And that potentially plays into this discussion as well, because there's the possibility that we could save a significant amount of money on that item. And it is much easier to do that not being part of RUS than it is being part of RUS. Although we have broached that subject with RUS, and they are working to see if that's something that they could help us with as well. So any other questions before I move on to my last item?
Just in general, if this winds up being a break even or even costing us a little money, do you think it's worth it? What are the pros and cons of leaving RUS?
Well, I think that one of the biggest pros is that you get out of the extremely bureaucratic red tape that RUS requires. It's really difficult in order to process some of this stuff. Had we not looked at the community solar and financing it through an alternative source, it would have added another year to year and a half to being able to build it, because they were going to require a number of things related to additional studies that some of which we had done, but they thought that they were too old, so they wanted us to redo them. And just the ease of being able to make decisions, the flexibility to do it. Typically, anything we do with them takes months, and typically at least 6 months to be able to do. And Stacy and Scott deal with it almost on a daily basis. Whenever we have something that we need to do, they just make it very difficult. Now, they say that they are trying to become more user-friendly, and they've been working on it for a year and a half. They're not there yet.
And do we know of other co-ops? Go on.
I was just going to say, let me just add, and this is not to put some on the scale one way or another, but from a legal standpoint, the strictures of compliance with RUS are far greater than with other financiers like CFC or CoBank.
And are there other distribution co-ops within Colorado that have taken this step?
Many have. Many have bought out of RUS for some of the reasons that I discussed. Some of them did it even though it would cost them more. And in some cases, it's not close to a break even, but the staff time and the flexibility to do projects, that it was worth it to them to be able to do it. And, you know, I think that what we need to keep in mind is that if we buy out, that it does not preclude us from going back at some point in the future if interest rates are favorable to use RUS and borrow money from RUS. We would still be able to go back and borrow money from them. It would just be a question at that point of whether or not it made financial sense and business sense.
Final question, would this change our debt service coverage ratios or anything like that? Or would that all remain more or less the same?
Typically, they're going to be about the same. What it does do is, and this is one of the other, I guess, benefits, is RUS determines your debt limit and how much of it you've used based on what you originally borrowed. So giving you an example, if we borrow $30 million on a 30-year loan and we're 27 years into the loan and we have $2 million left to pay, they count against our debt limit $30 million. And that's one of the challenges that we had with the RESP loan, is they wanted us to increase the board to increase our loan limit because they said, you know, to add $10 million put us over the $90 million. And I said, well, it doesn't. We've only got $33 million that we borrowed from you. And they said, no, but if you look at how much you have how much the original amount was, that counts against the limit. So they just have some arcane and frankly rules that no other lender that I've ever dealt with has, and they see them as market, and nobody else sees it that way. Okay, move on to the last thing, wanting to end with a flourish and with good news. Mpei has made 3 contributions to support organizations in Grand and Jackson County. The Mountain Family Center, we are helping with their Thanksgiving baskets. We're going to help them, and we're not providing all the money for this, but they're going to do 350 families, in Grand County and 150 families in Jackson County. We are working with Snow Mountain Ranch and their Mission 623 program, which helps the YMCA serve military families, and I thought that was particularly appropriate on Veterans Day. The program gives military families a chance to reconnect before or after active duty service, and the families can come up and they get a 2-night stay, all their meals are included, and they have access to family activities. They can extend beyond that, but that part of it is subsidized by the YMCA. And last, but certainly not least, the Jackson County Council on Aging. We're supporting their Harvest Craft Festival gift basket fundraiser, and the council provides transportation services, educational programs, medical services, and meals to seniors in the Walden area. So that is the last of my report. If anybody has any questions, be happy to try and address them. Okay, if not, then we can move on to the safety report and move to my other screen here. You see that we had 2 incidents, one on October 20th, one on October 12th. Our boring contractor had hit an unlocated primary cable. It was a bad locate, and so USIC is responsible for that, and they will pay for any damage as a result of it. One of the excavating contractors dug into a single phase primary, and it caused some damage, but it was we were able to repair that. So you see the damage report to the backhoe in the wash bay, and then the damage winch on the boom, and all of these, the damage reports have been issues that have been discussed at the Tuesday morning safety meeting. They are areas where we are then discussing it with all of the linemen and hopefully using them as a teaching tool to eliminate future issues like this. And over the last 2 safety meetings, I believe, we've talked about attention to detail, that it's the small things that cause the big issues. And just focusing on a lot of the small things. We've seen some real improvement in that area in the last couple of weeks. The crews are taking it to heart. We have been extremely lucky with these and some of the other incidents that have happened, that we've had no injuries, but people could have been injured. And so that's what our focus is on, making sure that we don't have any injuries, and that we are in a position that hopefully we reduce the amount of damage that is caused as well. You see the safety committee activities as well as the loss prevention activities there. One thing that I will mention, it's not in this report because it did not happen in October, so you'll see it in November. We had an employee last week when the parking lot was slick, was walking across the parking lot, fell, injured their arm, and had to have surgery. She is back at work and is working one-armed at this point, but she's able to continue working, and we were able to limit the lost time related to that incident. We put out a reminder to all of the employees that, when you're walking across the parking lot, be very careful. We provide ice grippers if that's necessary. When there's snow and ice on the parking lot, there was not, or it did not appear that there was. I think it was black ice that she ended up slipping on. And, so it is going to be a focus of one of our safety meetings, I believe in either tail end of November or in December, about winter safety and being careful with that. So with that, if there are no questions, then I would ask for approval of the safety report. Dick, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
So moved.
Thanks, Dick. A motion by Dick and a second by Liz. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Discussion and action item.
Okay, discussion and action items. Item number 1 or A is the ratification of the NRECA benefits for life insurance, business travel insurance, and long-term disability for 2022. This is ratifying the action that was taken by the board in October.
Justin, did you have a question?
I think he was moving to ratify it.
I was moving my screen's locking up on everyone, so I'm hearing here and there, but I'll move to approve the ratification of A.
I'll second. Justin, you're a little fuzzy looking too. I don't know what's going on.
I thought it was just the beard.
No,
Maybe.
it's like his camera or something.
All right, we got a motion and a second for the ratification. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 2 or B. It is policy A5, assets of the cooperative. It's up in the rotation for review. Levi reviewed it and had no proposed changes to it.
There's one thing I noticed, well, a couple of things I noticed in this, but I guess the biggest one is it actually seems to be a little bit inconsistent with our bylaws. This policy describes a process whereby we would put this issue to the members for mail vote, and the bylaws describe a process where members can amend documents and make changes by mail vote, but the bylaws are pretty specific that if we do that route, 75% of the members have to vote, and then half of that has to be for the motion for something to pass. This document describes that process a little bit differently. It says that 75% of the valid votes have to be in favor of it, but I think a close read of our bylaws doesn't allow for that. That, and it still contains some very specific provisions about power supply that I would propose making neutral in case that's to change. But I would like to ask Levi and Bryson to take another look at this just to make sure that that is consistent with our bylaws.
Okay, we can table this and have Levi and Bryson take another look at it and bring it back in December.
Any
Okay,
other questions? Comments? Okay, go ahead, Mark.
moving on to 3 or B, depending on which agenda you're looking at. It's policy A6, selection of attorney duties and compensation. Levi did not review this as he thought it may be a conflict of interest considering he is currently the attorney, and staff had no suggested changes to it.
I just had a couple of questions. One is, do we generally consider the board the committee referenced in A1, 2, under 2, policy A1, and then also do we, if we seen, I mean, we see in the budget, but I'm curious about the written agreement that the board's supposed to review prior to the beginning of each year.
Yeah, I think that under A1, it says a committee of directors. So it could be a committee of the whole or a subset of the board of directors that would make the recommendation to the board. I believe, and I don't know that I have been here when we have selected our attorney, but typically the decisions like this are a committee of the whole. So it's all of the board that participate in making that decision. So there's not really a need to make a recommendation to the board because it's all of the board that are making that decision. And Bryson,
I would say too,
if
just
you
lends the flexibility, right? So we could have a committee, or the committee could be the full board.
and I would defer to maybe Jeff. Have in the past, has there been a specific, I'm assuming there's a specific agreement or contract with Levi's firm that the board does see and approve?
Correct.
Excellent. I guess move to accept and make public policy A6.
Thanks, Liz. A motion by Liz and a second by Dick. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, motion carries. A6 approved.
Okay, moving on to item 4 or D, the budget. The board had the budget and a detailed discussion on the budget at its October meeting. This is for approval of the budget. I will note that it's being presented in its original form. Management discussed the board's input at one of our management meetings, specifically questions related to facilities and equipment purchases. And I believe that the original budget is in support of MPE's strategic goals. The discussion related to the equipment, I think that part of what we do, and our third goal is maintain safe and reliable service, and that safety is related to our employees. We try to provide them with the best equipment possible to keep them as safe as possible and to maintain reliable service. And I'm not suggesting that the board's comments were suggesting otherwise. What we do when we are looking at any equipment purchase is we look at numerous sources to be able to acquire the equipment to try and get the best price possible. We also look at lease options when those might be more favorable to the organization. We don't lease much, if any, equipment unless we have something that is a long lead time item. One of the items that we have ordered is, we were told, was 650 days. And so what that sometimes requires us to do is lease equipment to fill in until that item can be delivered to us. And on the facilities questions, I think that one of the goals that we have, number 5, is to be an employer of choice. The building here has challenges. We are out of space, and we have been trying to, I will say, squeeze people into the space that we do have because we have hired some additional folks. And it has created some workspaces that are not necessarily conducive to productivity, and that with COVID and other things, it brings about some safety issues because there's no way for people to socially distance in the offices when you have multiple people in an office. Part of what we were looking to do with the facilities questions were find a way to better utilize the space that we do have. And part of that was the discussion that we've had for the last 2 years about modifying the boardroom. And had we done some of those things, which I'm not suggesting that we should have done them at this point because we've continued to put them off because we've had other priorities, we could potentially have some more in-person board meetings because we would have had sufficient space to socially distance. I have had the opportunity to visit a number of other Colorado co-ops, and I will tell you that our facilities are probably not even close to the top. And if we want to be an employer of choice, I think that we need to provide a safe and comfortable work environment for our employees in order to be able to either hire or maintain those folks. And so I'm not commenting in any way that the board doesn't support the goal, because I believe the board does. But I just think that, while it's great to have that conversation, and it had the effect of having management go back and look at the budget. We had discussed all of these things, but look at it again and see, are there changes that we can make to, make this a better budget for the organization? And after going through all of the discussion that the board had and additional input the management did, we are presenting the budget in its original form. And so I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Hey, Mark, I have one thing to add. I did change Liz and Dick. So that's changed.
Okay, I'm not sure what the change related to Liz and Dick was.
Page 2, board of directors or titles. So we just,
Oh,
I just need to update that page with Michelle. I'll get that in there today.
You still planning to design a gym?
Well, we have a workout facility here. It's a single room, and where it's currently located, it is using space that could be better used for something else. And so if we reconfigure the facility, we would move that to what I would say a less productive space for workout, and then allow us to utilize the space where it currently is to potentially have 2 offices for employees that either we currently have, or the intent is that we would hire somebody, although we've had difficulty in finding someone to hire.
And
Mark?
it seems like there's an increasing trend towards work from home. How come we need to have a physical office space for everybody?
Because with the I think you are right, there is increasing trend for that, but it takes appropriate internet service and bandwidth and those types of things, and we don't currently have those in this area. Many of our employees have what I would call on the low end of internet service or spotty service. So working from home is not something that works well for us. And a lot of the folks that we have here, they need to be in the office part of the time. Now they do field work as well, but they do need to be in the office. And those are some of the folks that we're trying to address and utilize. We basically converted what was a file room into 2 offices, and that allowed us to move Jessica from, she kind of works in a closet now, into something that is more conducive to having conversations with employees and stuff like that. So I think that what we've seen with some of the others is they've modified the space to be able to have both work from home and people in the office. But in most cases, what I've seen is they've had a much larger space to start with, and we don't. The last addition to this building was when the dozer took off part of the building and we kind of rebuilt it. I think at that time it would have been a good time to actually look at how the building was utilized. It's kind of a choppy setup and a lot of what I would call wasted space. And I think that, as we continue to move towards, a future where maybe work from home is more of an option, that, we will still need the space that we have now. What that will most likely allow us to do is not have to increase any space that we have. And I don't know if I answered your question, Kristen.
Yeah, the thing I'm kind of questioning is all that was in this budget was money for an architect for the main Granby space at 50 grand, and then a bunch of money for things like, redoing the concrete and painting at other facilities. So this budget doesn't actually get us to where you want to go. It's the first step. And I think some of the questions were along some of the other things, like, do we need 100 grand to redo, blacktop and paint? And, do we really want to spend a bunch of money on a new executive car? So yeah, like I don't quite see how this budget actually gets the space we need, or that you're asserting we need.
Well, and I would say that all of our facilities have had a lot of deferred maintenance, things that should have been done and have not been. One of the safety items that was identified by a RESAP was related to our Kremlin facility and drainage and ice buildup and things like that during the winter. And those things have been kind of not done. They probably should have been done before. And so those are some of the things that you were talking about with concrete and other things. you're right that in this budget we have, and we won't use any more than we need to. But before we can actually come in and say, this is how we should redesign the facility and get additional space, we have to have a plan, because I think that part of why we're in the position that we're in now is that in the past, when they have built stuff, they just built something onto what we had, and it didn't necessarily look at better utilizing the space. That's what we did with engineering, and then with the remodel in the member service area. We are better utilizing the space that we have, taking out some of the hallways that aren't necessary, and utilizing that space in a better way. You're right that this doesn't necessarily solve all of our problems, but it hopefully gives us a roadmap to be able to solve those problems. And if, as you suggested, we move more towards something where we have people working from home and it's not needed, then we have the plan to do it, but we don't necessarily have to spend the money.
Yeah, I guess I have a couple comments. I hear Kristen's concern about how workforces are changing and how they work, how the pandemic has brought more remote work. My personal feeling is that for a lot of our employees, if you look at our service territory, the places with the best internet service are the most unaffordable places to live. And so our employees often don't live there. It'll take significant upgrades for everyone to be well connected in our service territory and able to work from home if they choose to. But I do, I know I've been following TIAA CREF and how they've managed to keep their business going during this, the last 18 months. And heard, they have millions of feet of office space sitting empty. And yet they've been able to continue to operate their core business successfully. And so I think it does give you pause and make you think about how we're going to operate in the future and the amount of uncertainty that we face in the future, and still meet our core demands from our members. One thing that I wonder is whether or not having two committees, but one to start with would it make sense to have a committee take a look at any policies regarding procurement and just review them with, and have some staff members on that committee and make sure that the policies allow the staff to work with expediency and have flexibility, but yet reassure the board that that we're getting the best deals that we can get, and that our members' money is well spent, and that there's a fairness that vendors, across vendors, so that there's some sort of competitive process. And I just wonder if that might help allay any concerns that the board has about the budget, that we know our policies are there. And so anyway, that's food for thought.
I had a question. I haven't seen in the longest time I don't know the appropriate terminology, a plan for asset replacement long-term. In other words, we have 20 vehicles. What's the rotation on the vehicles? We have office space. Is our building adequate for the number of employees we have or the number of employees we foresee we will have in the future? I think if we're going to look at this, I think we need to take a long range look, 3, 5, 10 years out, looking at how often we replace a vehicle. Is it mileage? Is it years? Is our building large enough to maintain the staff we have or the staff we'll have in 5 or 10 years, and start planning a long-term approach? Now, I don't know whether this will be part of a meeting the board has where we look into the future, but I think something like that will give us a better idea. I never had any idea that Kremlin needed repairs. It was never in my opinion, brought to the board's attention. So what I'd like to see is, if we have these things sitting out there that are going to be needed in the future, I'd like to see a timeline of when the staff feels these changes need to take place. If we have that, then we can plan. If we have to build a bigger building, if we have to have people work from home, looking at all the different possibilities, and then we can sit down and we can start planning on how we're going to spend our money and do it in the best possible way. So I'd like to see something like that happen. I don't know the appropriate methodology for getting it done, but I'd like to see us get there.
Yeah, the
And that-
equivalent of like a reserve study.
Yeah, and that's part of what the management team discussed, is that most everywhere that I've worked, we've had like a 5-year acquisition plan for equipment, that type of thing. And so we're going to be developing that to where that we have specific rules as to when something needs to be replaced. I would say with our fleet and equipment, it's based on the number of hours that it works. It is based on, in the case of vehicles, with the number of miles that they have, and also with the maintenance that is required on those vehicles. So obviously you can say that you want to go 120,000 or 150,000 miles on a truck, but if you start to get to a point where you are spending more money to maintain it every year than it would be to acquire another vehicle, that's something to look at. And that's typically what we have done in my past lives, is that we had something like that we put together so that we knew, when you reach these things, this is when you start looking at something. You plan for it because you assume that, it will take you 5 years to get to this, or 10 years to get to something based on current usage. But one of the things that we looked at MLMP, we had a fleet of 240 vehicles and pieces of equipment, so backhoes and that kind of thing. And one of the biggest drivers for us on replacement was maintenance costs on those, so that when they got to a point that we were spending more than $10,000 or $20,000 in a year to maintain something, it was time to get a new piece of equipment. And so that's something that management is going to work on for 2022, is putting together that plan for that. Now, as to maintenance on facilities, I think that is an area where we have fallen down as well. The person that did kind of oversee that area, I think in the past, didn't do quite as good a job as they should have, because you should also have a similar plan that, every 10 years you paint the building, every 20 years you replace the roof, parking lot maintenance, those types of things. You have those similar kinds of plans in place to make sure that stuff is done as it's needed. Now, obviously, if you get to that point and you don't believe it's needed, or the funds are not there, then you may defer some of that maintenance. But one of the things that will come back to bite you faster than anything else is continuing to defer maintenance, because then it hits you all at one time. And it's not a question of if you want to do it, it's that you have to do it in order to maintain your facilities and your system.
If I make a motion to approve the budget with the condition that management next year bring us a long-term facilities maintenance plan and associated budget, would people be ready to vote on that?
Yeah, I would be.
Any objections, Jeff?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, so I make a motion to approve the budget and to direct management to bring us within a year a long-term facilities and equipment maintenance plan and associated budget.
I think personally, I would not vote for that. I don't want to tie that into the budget. I appreciate the budget that they brought us. I think Mark's explained it well, that they are going to look at those things. So I would not vote to be in favor of that, but if that is your motion, we can give it a shot.
And speaking on behalf of management, we are going to do that, and whether you want to do it as a single motion or two motions, I'm more than willing to support that, because it's something that I believe that frankly we should have been doing, and we weren't. And so whether it's just for operational purposes for management, or so that the board has more insight into what is potentially coming in the future, I think that type of plan is necessary. Now, whether the board is comfortable doing it as one or two motions, I don't know that it makes a lot of difference to me representing management. So.
From a
Okay,
practical
I guess it's fine.
standpoint, it probably doesn't make a huge difference because the plan is to do it anyway. However, from a legal standpoint, if you do approve your budget contingent on this plan being produced and somehow it isn't produced, then you have not approved your budget.
so given what Mark says, and I think we can hold staff to this, and I have to say, we've asked staff for a lot of things. I mean, wildfire plans and whatnot, and this has not gone to the top of the list until we see the budget, and then we get concerned about it. We do have this type of plan for our distribution system. I mean, Stacy and Scott work on it, and we try to decide when things are going to need to be replaced, and you're using more insight with NISC to do that. And I think that looking at all the gutters, the parking lots, the buildings, one comment I will make is that, Joe, I appreciated your comments about ventilation in the Granby building and how you guys have handled that, but I didn't see it for Kremling and Walden. And, we have line people. I don't know how much the folks there use common areas when they're getting warm. They come in from a job and they have to debrief, making sure that all those buildings are safe for employees as far as ventilation and in safe places. And I don't know the buildings. I'm guessing the guys come in and they're cold and wet and they might need showers, that type of stuff. For all the facilities, I'd like to, hear what staff has to think about, but I think you guys will do that. And so I would move that we approve the budget as it is.
We have a motion on the floor, so you're just going to ignore that?
No, I'm not going to ignore it. So, but I was unclear that you had actually made a motion there, Kristen. You were asking
Made a
for
motion.
She made a motion.
She made a
but now you
motion.
need a second.
Okay.
That's right. So if without a second, the motion will fail for lack of a second. If there is a second, then you have to deal with that motion first.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Kristen. Is there a second? Seeing none, the motion dies for a lack of second.
Okay,
Liz, did you want to,
Yeah, I move to approve the budget
as presented?
as presented.
Thank you. We got a second by Dick. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
Is the budget a document that is public?
Really quick, Kristen, do you want your opposition noted in the minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay.
The motion does carry.
Justin, about whether or not the budget is public. Stacy, is our
Right.
budget publicly posted somewhere?
No, we haven't ever posted it publicly.
Okay.
Jeff, I'd like to
Yeah.
make sure we put on next month's agenda. I'd like to make it a formal scenario of directing staff to take up the maintenance scenario. That gives proper notice and everything, and we can vote on Kristen's idea, because I'm in favor of that idea, but not tying it to this budget. So I'd like to make sure we put that on the agenda and vote on that next month.
You
Well,
can make a motion
Well,
now.
would it-
You can make a
Yeah,
motion now, because we have added in the past to the agenda, at Levi's suggestion, emergency business. And I think that there is nothing to stop someone from making that second part of Kristen's motion at this time.
I
Wait till next month.
would like Kristen to make the motion, and I'd be
Dick,
more
it
than
was
happy.
your idea, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I make a motion that the board direct staff to develop a fleet and maintenance long-term plan and present it to the board at prior to next year's budget so that we can review it.
Second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Dick and a second by Kristen. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Jeff, this
Carl,
is
did you-
Carl. I have one comment. It sounds to me, and I'm in favor of what Kristen proposed, but it sounds to me like this is a process for strategic planning and not in a board setting. I think we need to delve into it a little more than just a half an hour or 15 minutes at a board meeting, and maybe tour some of these facilities and actually visually see what the issues are that staff is bringing up and discuss them and go from there. Personally, I don't think we have enough strategic planning sessions to talk about some of these issues, and I would like to see more, and I think this is one of them that needs to be brought up in that setting. Thank you.
Carla, I would say, yeah, that's well said. I wouldn't be in favor of this motion either. I think we've given staff clear direction on, what that looks like going forward, that plan. So I think they have a pretty darn good idea at this point. If we as a board want to take a higher level look and we want to go see some maintenance issues, then we need to go look at those facilities. We need to walk around, our headquarters in Granby and see just exactly how that functions for employees. Because I don't think they're asking for a whole lot here, other than really maintaining our assets, our members' assets. So I would not be in favor of that motion. Any other discussion?
And I agree with what you said, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, I'm
Chris?
just a little confused because when Carl initially got on the phone, he said he agrees with what Kristen proposed, and then by the end he didn't. So we're all over. But I think that the future of work sort of building layout, that's a strategic discussion, perhaps. I think that going around and looking buildings, it would help us be more informed as a board, but condo associations have reserve studies done all the time, trying to figure out, what it's going to cost, what's in 10 years from now, what are we going to be spending on these buildings and what are we going to be having addressed so that we know that those buildings are going to be in good shape, and the same for the fleets. And so I don't think this is a crazy, it just puts in our minutes. It reminds us that we're going to get this done. I would suggest that maybe we have it done by September, October, and that if particular directors want to be more involved, that they get a draft earlier or try to work with staff a little bit more. But I think it doesn't hurt to put it in the minutes that we're going to do this.
As a motion, Liz,
Yeah.
correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark, well,
I think Dick, go ahead.
Mark, do you feel the staff has clear direction? This is the direction that the board wants to go without this motion?
Well, I think the staff has clear direction from the board, but I think that based on our earlier discussions as staff, this is something that we've come to, and I've directed that this is something that we need to do because it's really difficult to kind of plan longer term decisions on a year by year basis. You really need to have something, as one of the board members, I believe it was Liz, referenced the plan that we do with our system. We have someone come in and look at the system and analyze it, and they say these are the kinds of things that you are going to need to do in the next 5 or 10 years, and they develop that plan for you, and then you, based on that, figure out how you're going to do those things in that time period, because what they're identifying is potential real problems for you if you don't do that. And that's part of what I've discussed with the management team, is that we're in the same boat with some of these other things that, you know, if you wait and you say, oh, well, this year we need to do this, but you're doing it piecemeal, it's not necessarily the way that it should be done. You need to have a more comprehensive approach to acquisition of equipment and fleet, and then also maintenance of buildings. And that, of course, I believe it may have been Carl or one of the other members that said, you know, or maybe it was Dick, that the possibility of building another facility. I mean, those are really big decisions that you need to know long before you get to putting it in the budget, because it's something that has significant potential impact to the cost for members.
I'm not sure
if that answers your question, Mark, but
I'm not trying to pigeonhole the staff. I realize they understand what we want. I just wanted to make it formal. And if the staff wants to make this part of our strategic planning, I'm leaving the details up to them as to when. I just want to make sure we have this prior to our next budget. That was the gist of my motion. How they do it, when they do it, if like Carl says, it should be part of strategic planning and we do walkarounds, I think that's part of how it's presented to us. I just want to make it formal that we have this document prior to the next budget. That was my impetus, so leave it there.
Okay, any further discussion? We do have a motion on the floor. So all those in favor? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3. Mark, what were you in favor for?
yeah, I think you have 5.
Okay.
And I don't know if Carl, if he is in favor or not. So you have 5 at this point.
I'm a no.
Okay, all those opposed. Carl be a no. Okay, motion carries.
Would those
All right.
opposed like their opposition noted in the minutes?
Yeah, you could put me in there as well.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to item number 5. We're going to delete that. It was put in as a placeholder because we might have needed to discuss something related to Vasquez Road. At this time, we don't need to because of the extension of the due diligence period. That moves us to item number 6, which is D8, Director Elections. And this is something that the board has discussed on at least 2 occasions, I believe. And to my knowledge, we never actually formalized a vote because Levi was continuing to review and we were updating some language. So the copy that you have in your board packet is with the Levi's review and updated language. And so I will let the board take it from there.
Hey, Bryson, I think this needs to be reviewed again. Under policy 1 deadlines D, there's a proposed edit to 60 days before the election. 45 days is actually in our bylaws, and it's a section of the bylaws that can only be amended with a vote of the membership. I don't think we have authorization as the board to change that.
Sorry, I had trouble getting the mute button. So, yeah, I think there are proposed changes to the bylaws to get it to 60 days, which would be in compliance with the new statute. I have to check with Levi on his review of that as far as the membership approval. I think you're probably right there. Even if your bylaws were said 45 days and the statutory requirement was 60 days, you couldn't enforce your bylaws in contravention of the statute.
Are you sure the statute changed this, the 45-day thing to 60 days?
That was my understanding, but let me check on that in the interim and confirm it. But it was Levi who did the review of this, and that's what he communicated to me. So let me check that and verify, because that's my understanding.
Okay, yeah. For the record, the bylaw section is section 4B, and
Right.
it says, yeah, at least 45 days prior to the date of the annual meeting.
Yeah, and
I
that's
think we
something
could put in policy that we would request petitions 60 days before, but I don't know if we can say we require them, given that.
Well, yeah, so, I mean, I think Levi's always argued at least 45 days means that 60 days meets at least 45 days from his perspective. But I looked at this and I was like, wow, there are a lot of dates in here. Is he absolutely right in making sure that all these dates comport with the new statute? And I didn't have time to look at the statute, and I'm not an attorney, so.
Statute aside, like our bylaws provide for how we can change those section of the bylaws. And this is actually one of the sections of the bylaws that is like specifically our article or our bylaws say you cannot change it just by a 2/3 vote of the board because it's
Sure.
related to elections.
Yeah, let me verify, and I will do that during the course of the meeting, the statutory requirement. But if what your bylaws say is now in contravention of the statute, you can't enforce your bylaws in contravention of the statutory floor. But let me double check that and confirm what the requirement is. And you can table this for now and then maybe bring it back for approval later at the meeting, during this meeting after we've confirmed.
Okay, but then Article 12 of our bylaws says that except as to Article 3, Sections 4 and 5, Article 4 and Article 7, Section 1, these bylaws may be amended, altered, repealed, or supplemented by a 2/3 affirmative vote of the board of directors then serving. And then it under B, it specifies that those ones have to be amended by a vote of the membership. So even if we came back now and we said, okay, the updated statute allows for 60 days, we still don't have authority as the board per our bylaws to change that. We
Change the
have to.
bylaw. That's correct.
But this is
Okay.
a policy.
Yeah.
We're not changing the bylaws, we're changing the policy. And if our bylaw says we're supposed to do something that violates the state statute, we have to follow the state statute, and our policy should be.
Well, let's double check the amendments to the statute, because the statute currently says 45 days as well, unless that was changed in the election changes. But then I would like to make sure that we follow our bylaws, because we do have a duty of obedience. And even if we need to update our bylaws, there's a process for that, and we should be following that process.
Sure. So my understanding is the statute did change that based on Levi's review of House Bill 1131. Regarding your duty to your bylaws, you also have a duty to comply with the law, which supersedes the bylaws. You could not do something in your bylaws that is against statute. But again, we'll confirm and make sure we're all on the same page here. I agree with your assessment of the mechanics of the bylaws. But if your bylaws are in conflict with state law, you're going to have to comply with state law.
I got that, but just legal procedural question. Do we still have to bring it to the members if the bylaws say we have to bring it to the members?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, eventually we do, but we have to comply with the law even before the members. Like, I don't know what you do if you bring it to the members and the members vote it down. And, you know, then you're still obligated to comply with the law and the members haven't changed the bylaws. So hopefully that doesn't happen.
A common thing, a common remnant in bylaws that were actually changed in statute a few years ago. Most bylaws used to require for the counting of a vote that they be placed in a secrecy sleeve, because that was what the statute initially required. But then they changed the statute to say a vote will count whether or not there is a secrecy sleeve. Now, most co-ops who still had that remnant in their bylaws complied with the statute and counted votes, even though there wasn't a secrecy sleeve, despite what the bylaws still said at that point, because the primary duty is going to be to comply with the laws. I do agree that the process to change your bylaws, the things that need to go before the membership have to go before the membership. In Liz's scenario, where the membership votes it down and they retain essentially an illegal bylaw provision, when faced with enforcing their bylaws or the statute, the organization, the duty is going to be to comply with the laws in that scenario, regardless of what happens at a member meeting. So yeah, but we'll get confirmation on that in the interim. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and we don't need, I mean, at some point here, we need to get this done, but I mean, we'll have elections in what, in May? Is that when they are? June?
I think, Rob, do the ballots go out? I know you've been working on this, so unmute yourself to respond. And he may be looking.
Well, this kind of goes over all that timeline, but I think one of the questions is letting the people who might want to run for
Right.
position of director, letting them know what the timeline is and being clear on that. And we have to start doing that 60 days plus 2 months before the election. And our election is May 14th. So we have to have this all, and Rob can correct me if I'm wrong, but we need to have this on the website. It's on MPI's website no less than 2 months before the petitions to become a candidate are due. So.
Okay, so yeah, I can help a little bit. Our notice for director election and call for candidacy will be in January. The candidates have until March 15th to turn in their petitions. The ballots will be mailed no later than April 19th. And our annual meeting where the votes are tabulated, final votes, is May 14th. So again, I'll do that one more time. January is the notice of the call for director election and candidacy. March 15th is when they have to turn in nominating petitions. April 19th is the ballots will be mailed no later than that date. And the annual meeting is May 14th.
So we need to make a decision on this next month. I mean, that would be our drop dead to get this done.
So Bryson, I just looked it up. You're right. It did change it to 60 days. So that's absolutely as it should be. And then my final question is just, after we approve this policy, do we need to also bring this up in a bylaw change in an annual meeting with the members?
Yeah, we would put that on the agenda for the annual meeting for the things that needed to be changed and required a vote of the membership to do. So it would be part of our 2022 annual meeting, the bylaw changes that were necessary.
So I've confirmed 60 days is the statutory requirement. So the change is still recommended, because if you left it at 45 days pending member approval and somebody challenged that because we allowed one in that 45 days when it should only be 60, I think you would be in a tough position having not complied with the statute.
Make a motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anybody have any questions? Okay, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? All right, motion carries.
Can
Okay, moving
I,
on.
really quick, we did move right past item E. One thing I just want to plant the seed for, if, Mark, you anticipate any sort of necessary latitude in changing of deal terms as this goes down the line, then you would want to discuss that in executive session and probably have a separate approval for that. I don't know if that's part of it because of this extension, but it would be a changing authorization. So I'll defer to you on whether or not additional discussion in executive session is necessary. But if that's an issue, that would be recommended.
Levi, or I'm sorry, Bryson, I thought we did have a motion that, you know, when this whole thing started, to let Mark be able to negotiate on behalf of Mountain Parks. So wouldn't that cover it? I mean, because this has been ongoing, we've had
Yeah, I
other
understand
offers on the
that.
table.
Right now, did you approve subsequent to that the specific deal terms that have been contracted to at this point?
Well, I mean, I
No,
don't,
no, because we haven't brought back an action. Well, we have reported in executive session to the board the terms that have been in the contracts that we have seen, now the third one. And so what I believe in discussions with Levi was that once we get to where we will be ready to close and we have the necessary releases from RUS, CFC, and CoBank, then we will bring an item to the board for approval that actually authorizes us to sell the property.
Okay, so if you have it under a purchase and sale agreement, you will be bound to sell the property under the terms of that agreement, regardless of when closing happens, or else, you know, face the consequences, loss of specific performance, that sort of thing. I did discuss this with Levi, and he thought maybe additional authorization would be necessary. I mean, he thought it would, but if you've had other discussions, I'm willing to defer on that.
Well, we did pass a resolution at October's meeting, and I don't know if that resolution terms are
The terms of the purchase and sale agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anything's changing that would make that resolution not accurate. But I think probably all of that should get discussed in executive session if we have any concerns about it.
Yeah.
If you do discuss it and you want modified latitude, then any motion at worst would be superfluous to existing authorization, or if necessary, then you have it if you do authorize. So.
Well, and I believe that the board, when we first took this up, authorized me to negotiate the sale of the property. What Levi and I have done along the way is, as we have had offers, we have discussed with the board in executive session the actual offers. And while I don't think that based on my discussions with Levi, once we get ready to close, it's necessary. The title company at least wants to see an actual motion that says, from the board, that says you can sell this property. And so that was the path that we were planning to go down. As to Liz's question, no terms have changed from what we've initially discussed with the board. Obviously, as a result of any due diligence, they may come back and modify their offer, in which case we would discuss that modification with the board before accepting.
And if the timing works out for that, for any potential modification, then I don't think any additional authorization is necessary at this point. You can cross that bridge when you get there.
Okay.
Okay, then moving on to item 7, amending the MPEI bylaw Article 5, Sections 1 and 2. This is an update that's necessary to comply with the Colorado statute change. And basically, it's in Section 1 and 2, it allows for electronic attendance and voting. And this is, to Kristen's point earlier, this is one that does not require a vote of the membership. The board can make this change. But with that explanation, I will leave it to the board.
And then really quick, something Levi wanted me to bring up is this addresses electronic participation in board meetings. The issue that I think you guys have tabled to this point is member participation electronically in member meetings. This does not address that. Based on whatever direction you want to go there, that would require another amendment to the bylaws, which that would be subject to member approval if you wanted to propose such a thing.
Let's take them one at a time. Get this one done first. I move to approve this.
Thanks, Liz. We have a motion by Liz, second by Dick. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I'm curious if the board, based on what Bryson just said, if the board wants to tackle electronic participation in meetings and a bylaw that would enable that this year, or we want to try it next year, or if there are any thoughts, or I should just not have even asked that question.
How many people do we typically get at the annual meeting? Because we need 50 to make quorum, but then for changes to the bylaws, we need 100, right?
The last board meeting that we had in Granby, in the garage, we had a number in excess of 300. Now,
Okay.
believe that that is about 100 to 150 voting members. And it could be spouses or children or something like that that make up the remainder. But you are right, we need 50. And at the last Granby meeting, which would have been in 2019, I believe, we had over 300 that attended.
Well, at some point, we've got to do it, correct? I mean, if we want to comply with state law, so it's got to be done.
Well, and perhaps if we're going to address some of the other issues, like the 60-day, it might be a time to put as many things on there as possible and wrap it in a bow, and hopefully the membership votes to approve.
So to answer your question, Jeff, for electronic participation for members in member meetings, that's a permissive statute. So it is not required that you allow that. You can in your bylaws, but that's not something that you absolutely have to change.
And then if we change our bylaws to allow it, does that obligate us to do it, or does that just give us the flexibility to do it?
I believe you can do it in a way that allows you the flexibility. So you can make such participation available to the members with prior approval of the board. So you can do it in a flexible manner.
Flexibility seems good.
I think that's a good question, Kristen. I don't want to necessarily obligate us to do it if we don't have the technology or the need, but allowing us to do it. I think putting something in if we're going to do one bylaw change, it would save us money to figure out all the ones we want to do and try to get them this year rather than do one again next year.
Mark, is that something that's doable in that time frame by staff, or?
The ones that we have discussed, yes. Looking and seeing other things that we might want to do, possibly. I think that we can try and get as many changes as we can in and on the ballot. And of course, that would be a vote of all of the members and not just the members in the districts that had a director up for election. So So I think that to Kristen's point about how many people would we get, that might drive a few more people to vote on that as a, if we put it out there.
Bryson, have you guys done a similar language for other co-ops allowing electronic participation in annual meetings? Allowing boards to have the flexibility to allow.
So we haven't drafted the language yet. We have other co-ops who are considering it because this is a new thing. So most of them are in the same position that you're in.
And are they also considering allowing electronic voting for directors, or the flexibility to allow for? Are they changing their bylaws so that the board has the flexibility to allow electronic voting for director elections?
So again, that's all in the consideration process at this point.
Okay. It just seems
is this something CREA might have language around? I mean, this is something CREA wanted, right?
Yeah, as far as, go ahead, Bryson.
I would say I doubt they have a recommended bylaw revision
Yeah, not that.
for this. But most revisions are going to be very similar to the statutory language anyway. The statutory for like voting, to Liz's point, requires, a verifiable voting system. Most bylaw revisions are going to have that exact language in it.
And if we don't have to do it this year, we're still okay. I mean, we can take some time and do this, and make sure we're doing it right. Is that correct? I mean, we don't have to do anything in our next election as far as those bylaw changes.
As far as these specific bylaw changes, you don't. Again, with the 45 days to 60 days, you should do that at your next member meeting.
Okay. So I don't know. It seems like a lot to tackle, Mark. But that would be kind of your call if you guys think you could pull something off or not.
Well, I think that the changes to comply with policy D8, the 45 to 60 days, I think those are things that we can do. I think the allowing for electronic voting, that's probably something that maybe, we could possibly do, but I would agree that we should take our time and make sure that we do it right, as opposed to just get it in there. And at this time, I'm not aware of how we would do electronic voting and the system that we would need. And I would want to make sure that we had something in place, or at least knew how we would put something in place before we put in the bylaw, because if we put in the bylaw, even if it is something that the board has discretion to allow, I think you're going to potentially start seeing members that want that. And it is, you're suggesting to them that it is an option, but it might not be something that we could actually carry out at that time.
In part because your bylaws aren't going to show what the changing costs of doing that are. I think that I'm aware that Survey Ballot Systems has a program in place for this, but don't know what it costs. I mean, the costs could be pretty extensive, especially if it's beyond voting and it's member participation in a meeting in a verifiable way, to have meaningful participation as if present for, a significant number of members that may have large costs associated with it. So some obviously you want to do your due diligence on.
So you would bring us back something on D8, Mark, then in the future?
Yes.
For our next meeting. Okay. Is everybody good with that?
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little on Bryson's cost. How much does it cost us to do a bylaw amendment? Do we mail that out to everyone, or do we just do it? We just do it at the day of with the people who are in the room. So it doesn't cost that much.
So I haven't looked at your your process and your bylaws for the amendment. Most bylaws that I'm familiar with do require some advance notice of the language. So the language of the amendment would go out with the notice of the annual meeting.
But that's CCL, so that's not a really additional cost. The only reason why I suggested that is because I'm sensitive to cost too, and I'm sensitive to asking the members over and over to change things rather than asking them once to change things. And I'm sensitive to staff's concern about cost. I don't know how many members actually really read the bylaws. I have a hard time, I read the bylaws and try to remember what they say and, have to go back. So I guess, that's my concern about, when we talk about costs, everything has a cost. Not grouping them all together has a cost. Putting it out there that something's possible has a cost. So anyway,
Yeah. So Bryson, our bylaws say that if you're changing policy with regard to elections, you have to have 100 people present in person for a quorum, and we'll have that at the annual meeting. So it doesn't seem like there'd be any costs associated with mailings or whatnot. But then just, I think we should all take a step back for a second and remember the cooperative principles, democracy, democratic member control being among the top of them. And I don't think it behooves our membership to talk about cost in a way that would imperil more democratic participation from our membership. So I'm pretty sensitive to that. I'm also sensitive to the fact that in 2023, there's going to be an election for District 2, which is 80% members who do not live within our district. And so for them, it would be very useful to be able to have access to electronic voting. If we defer this one more year, that possibility is off the table.
Sure. And to be clear, what I was talking about with costs, and that's a business decision for you all, is the costs associated, one, with doing regular electronic voting, or the costs associated with electronic participation in member meetings. I'm, again, aware of survey ballot systems having a program in place for the electronic voting. As far as electronic participation in meetings, where someone could, or not just someone, but anyone who logs on can, comment in the same way or participate in the same way as they would at a in-person meeting, including any amendments that may show up the day of the meeting, as far as member amendments or member actions, motions to approve the minutes, whatnot. There may be significant costs associated with that. And I was just saying that should be part of your due diligence as determining whether or not you're going to allow that sort of participation. But I have no opinion on costs associated with amending your bylaws to allow it. So.
And I think to Liz's point, if we are going to do something and the notice is in the CCL, that has to be in the January CCL, which means that you'd have to approve something at the December meeting, because the magazine is finalized when, Rob?
Well, I'm supposed to have the content for January in by November 30th. But I do have some wiggle room after that. Your board meeting is November 9th. I'd have to double check. I think I can squeeze it in last minute at that time, but I would have to double check.
Well, we could potentially have something put together. The board could look at it. We could even do it at a special meeting, or approving it via email, and then ratified at the December meeting. But it's going to have to be something that's done fairly quickly in order to get it into the January magazine. That's why when someone refers to something that we did in the magazine, I typically have to ask them which magazine are you talking about, because we're working a couple in advance. So I think we just finished the article for December. And the GM article for December, but we did it at the end of October. So the process takes a little bit longer. So we can work with Levi and Bryson to put together something for bylaw changes related to the 60 days, and we can potentially look at some language to provide to the board and have the board approve it. I would say via maybe an email thing that would allow us to do it before the end of November or first part of December prior to the board meeting, and then it could just be ratified at the board meeting. If that's acceptable to the board.
Does it sound good to everybody?
Carl, Jeff, can I have the floor a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
I personally think we're rushing this too quickly, so I'm not in favor of going ahead with this and would vote against it. I'm in favor of the 60-day deal, but as Bryson has pointed out, and the question I was going to ask is, what is it going to cost the membership and the technology available to actually do it? I don't think has been discussed much, and knowledge of the board to what it would actually cost to do this. So I'm not in favor of trying to rush this through. So that's my comment.
Well, and Carl, what I was intending that we would do is we would do language, as Bryson talked about, which would allow the board to do this if they chose to. It would not be a requirement. And obviously the board could take its time in determining, whether they wanted to do it. And one of those things would be determining what the actual cost might be for doing something like that. So I think that's what the intent was of some of the earlier discussion, is give the permissive right to the board, but not necessarily require it.
Yeah, but Bryson also brought up the point that if we put that in here without understanding what the costs are, that the membership is going to demand it, and we will be put into a position that we can't make a decision. We'll have to supply it regardless of the cost. So, like I said again, I'm not for rushing this.
I think that's speculative, Carl.
But Mark, I don't think
I can't argue. I can't argue that it is. I'm just trying to be a little cautious, and I'm sensitive also to your comments about the democratic way and providing every opportunity we can to have membership participation, but I don't think we're understanding what the implications are at this point. And so like I said, I'm not in favor of rushing it.
Well, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we were talking about complying with D8 in our bylaws, not what Carl's referring to.
Well, no, I think that, yes, we have discussed complying with D8, but there was also discussion about, I think it was Liz that said that rather than going to the members multiple times, that it might be easier to do the two things together. So D8 and potential electronic voting. And then Kristen did mention that, in 23, the district that will come up has a high percentage of non present members, I'll say, in their housing. So if we don't do it in 22, then in 23, we could potentially put it in place, but it wouldn't affect the 23 election. And if I'm mischaracterizing what you said, Kristen, please.
No, you're right. I mean, and I'm thinking maybe in 23, we look at it and decide it is in the best interest in our members. And if we have some authorization 22 to do electronic balloting, if the board so chooses, then we have that option in 23. Otherwise, we have to wait until 24.
So I guess, Jeff, the answer to the question is, we have discussed both, but there is no direction or motion at this point on either.
Well, I felt like the direction I was going was that, and I understand what Liz is saying, but if we can comply, if you can get us back on something on D8, we don't have to rush the electronic issue right now. I mean, I don't want to see us rushing into something that, like Carl brings up, that, you know, we might have to comply with. So I'd like to see that really fleshed out.
We separated them. We made the motion on D8. We agreed, we passed that. It's going to go on the ballot. Then we started talking about the other stuff. I'm not sure we have consensus on it. You know, there's pros and cons. I guess I have less concern that we're going to be, that the membership is going to bang down our doors and require us or ask us to do these things because we've given ourselves this permission. But it could happen.
It could happen independent of us. If members care that much, there's a process in our bylaws where they can do it.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Well, and Liz, I believe that the board passed D8 as the policy. There was not, and I will defer to the note taker, there was not a motion to direct staff to provide bylaw changes related to D8.
Okay, so moved.
Okay.
So we have a motion on the floor for bylaw correction for D8. We have a second by Dick. Any further discussion? Does everybody understand the motion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, that brings us to staff reports, and we are at 9:48. Do you want to take a short break?
Yeah, how about we be back at 10? Work for everybody? Okay.
Jeff, did you see my question?
I did. I think I have the, so.
Like I would.
So you said your question is who voted against the budget motion. So I think everybody voted.
I didn't hear any of that until it said Carl wanted his noted and you said me too. And then
the actual budget to approve the budget, the one no vote was Kristen. And then the follow-on motion related to directing staff to do the plan and bring it back prior to the budget in 22. That was the no votes were Carl and Jeff.
Okay.
It's hard to know. You seem to have a lag, so it's hard to know. Like when Jeff says all in favor, your hand goes up about when he says, "Are there any nay votes?" And so it's hard to tell whether you're an aye or a nay. So, at least from my perspective.
Okay, it was very choppy in that span, so I wanted to make sure we had who was doing what.
So Justin, did we capture your voting correctly with what Mark just said? Is that correct then?
No, I voted yes, and then I didn't hear any of the one that Carl and you voted no for. So, but
okay,
I don't think my vote would make a difference either way, so it's fine.
If you want to you can You could try to chat me on the vote, or if you're fast enough to get it to me. I can look for it in the chat box if you still got that delay going on.
Well,
Okay.
and the other thing, Justin, that I have seen in the past that helps is if you turn your camera off,
Yeah.
it sometimes makes it a little bit easier. You would then have to verbally vote, but it sometimes will help with the internet.
Yep. It seemed to be fine the rest of the meeting here, but right in that span there. So thank you.
Well, I'll try to keep an eye on it, Justin.
No, it's okay. I just, when I heard then that somebody said there's 5 yeses and then there's some no's, and then I was wondering why you were voting it for something, like if there's a tiebreaker. So yeah, that's
I was
it.
anticipating some tie there, but okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you in a couple minutes.
Hey, Jeff. Do you know where
Yeah.
to go? Do you know where to go on the settings so I can keep my screen on longer? Do you know what area that is?
Are you talking about your iPad, Dick?
Yeah, the iPad. I'm trying to find in settings where to go to actually
I don't,
keep it on. And I was looking at the
Yeah.
slide.
yeah, I'm not sure. I have never, it's got to be in the settings somewhere. Maybe Joe can get you there.
It settings, display,
Right.
and
Where do you go into?
So Joe, I think it's locked for us. Mine won't let me switch it off the 2 minutes. So you go, yeah, under display and brightness.
yes,
Mine
You
won't
said
let me
switch it
do it.
off of 2.
Nope. It's grayed out.
Where do you have it under brightness that it says 2? That's I don't
The
know.
auto lock.
Yes,
Yep, I see auto lock, right? It says, wait, it says 10 minutes is what mine says, but it doesn't last 10 minutes. Why can't it be left on completely? We're in a meeting and I have to keep going over here and tapping the screen. There
I'm not
should
sure
be.
Apple even allows that, but let me check the settings that we have on our end.
Yeah, I'm at 10 minutes, but it seems to go off before that. And I'm talking over here. I go over to this screen and all of a sudden it's gone. I have to log in again.
Apple does allow for it to never go off. I'm on my phone right now and it allows for it, but I can't select that on the iPad.
Right.
I
and
can't get it
should
to
be-
move.
You should be able to.
I'm thinking it's a security thing,
Well, hey,
because you might leave that around, Dick, and then someone might hack into Mountain Parks.
well, that should be our option at Mountain Parks. It shouldn't be the computer's option. That's my point. This thing doesn't go anywhere other than my office or when I have a meeting at that office. I don't take it well, I will take it if I go out of town. But it's just very frustrating. You're over here.
Oh,
you've got
I
another-
agree. I get it. Mine does the same thing.
Yeah.
So I know that you can do the lock, unlock it. So if you close it with the cover, it'll lock too. But yeah, my auto lock I can't change what it is.
Okay,
And it
Jeff,
is a security thing, I know, but
I'm
I
looking
believe we've got everybody back, yeah, all the board members back, so we can go forward if you'd like.
Yep, let's keep moving forward. Engineering, Scott.
Really quick, before we start the engineering, one thing I checked on during the break related to bylaw amendments proposed to the members. We would want to confirm that January is the actual deadline, that we're on the same page. I think that's the call for election deadline. And the language for a bylaw amendment proposed to the members only needs to go out with the notice of the annual meeting, which may occur in a later CCL, giving you more time to do that.
I believe our notice of the annual meeting is, or well, maybe you're correct. Maybe it is later than January.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would suspect that that would be the case, and the call for elections would be the January, but that may not be true. If the notice of annual meeting is in fact later, then you do have more time for your bylaw amendment proposal, because that's when the language needs to go out.
That's great.
Okay, Scott.
Okay, Scott.
Okay, you all have my report, and I'm available for questions, comments. I'll be glad to entertain any of those.
I had one question regarding your paragraph with undergrounding in Fraser. It just was confusing to me whether we were what was gonna happen there. So maybe you could clarify it.
In Fraser. Oh, you're talking about the fiber project?
Right, yeah.
So there's a section of the fiber route that goes basically from the Baptist church, and it goes to somewhere in the neighborhood of the Bank of the West. The original design that we had with Vantage Point showed that to be underground. And the reason for going underground there is that there are about 6 or 7 poles right along Highway 40 in that vicinity that will be very expensive to change out in order to make room for the fiber. For whatever reason, when Connexon looked at that section, they designed that to go on the overhead, and then consequently required those 6 or 7 poles to be changed. I pushed back on Connexon and said, we're not going to do that. And so then ADB has then gone back to Fraser to work on getting permit to do that underground. They believe that Fraser's actually going to let them do that this year. And so that will give us a big boost to get that part of it done.
Great.
And so it looks like it's actually going to happen. But I don't want to make that commitment until I see the bore rig in there actually doing that. So check back next month, and I'll give you an update on that.
Excellent. And then my other question was about, I was looking at your department statistics and thinking about the fire services, and the fire service work orders to date are 162. I'm not sure how many we had last year, but I was curious. I saw some of the permanent retirements, or I didn't see any permanently retired, and I was wondering what's happening to all the people in between, and whether or not, I know we set a hard date, but
So we haven't processed any of the retirements yet.
Okay.
And then after I wrote the report, we got a pretty good flood at the end of October, first day of November. We ended up with a whole lot. So I believe, after talking to Patty, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of somewhere between 110 and 150 that have not applied. And we assume that most of those are going to be people that are either sold their property or they're not going to rebuild.
Okay. I guess my only concern looking at this was, I know that it's become a much more complicated process for those who are wanting to rebuild than we initially thought, based on all the insurance shenanigans and whatnot. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were giving people enough time to get through the process of trying to figure out how to, navigate it. And if you think we are, then I'm good. That was my only point.
Scott?
Yeah, I think the next big problem is going to come next year. The application is one thing. It'll be whether they're able to get it done.
Yeah.
And that'll be a year from now. And we'll do our best to work with members. We certainly trying to offer them options to get this part of their project done. And try to also help Mountain Parks and the rest of the membership by not having this situation drag on and on year after year.
Right.
And so it's a balance that it's a balance that we're trying to mix here, and hopefully we've been successful so far. I believe that the majority of the ones that we have not got applications from are ones that are not going to build or have sold their property.
Scott, I had a question. You said they're going to underground that cable. My question is, are we going to underground that power in the future? Would that make sense to put in the appropriate vaults in the ground to, in the future, be able to string our power through the same, line?
We've had a discussion recently with regards to the main feeder going into Winter Park and down to the ski area that is in that vicinity. And we've kicked around the idea of whether we can put those facilities in at the same time. I believe that ADB is planning a directional bore, in which case it probably doesn't work. I mean, if they have an open trench, I think that it's in our best interest to try to get conduit in. But I believe in this case, they're going to directional bore. And I'm not sure with the town of Fraser whether they will allow the open trenching. I think that the boring is going to be part of why they're letting us do it this time of year. But that's an educated guess on my part. And certainly if we have a trench open in an area where we might be putting facilities underground in the future, we have discussed that.
The only question is that it would be to their advantage to underground that, just from the aesthetic standpoint, and that's why I'm saying if they're allowing us to do this, maybe now's the time to ask them, hey guys, we could get this out of your line of sight, which a lot of people would like, because most of the rest of the power that goes across there is underground. So I'm just wondering whether or not they may be amenable to allowing us to do that. Whether we can do it now or not wasn't my point. It's just a matter of saving money instead of going in the future.
Yeah, Dick, I think that particular route, I don't think we have a lot of overhead facilities, but I'm looking at my map right now. So give me another 30 seconds to answer your question.
Take 60.
Yeah, I want to get it right for sure.
So I can speak a little from personal experience on Liz's question. So I think the process that Mountain Parks has put in place was incredibly painless compared to the rest of the insurance issues. So we applied this summer, we got temporary power this summer, and it was kind of separate from the rest of the issues. So I think our process has been great.
Okay.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, Jessica.
Go ahead.
No, go.
Well, I was going to answer Dick's question in that the particular section we're looking to put the underground in, we don't have any overhead facilities. However, there is that main feeder that we may want to, it's currently underground, but we may want to move it, in which case we would look at if the possibility exists of getting conduit in. But it may be the way they're going to install it with directional boring that's not going to work at this time.
Okay, it's just an idea. If it could
Great
save
idea.
time and money.
It
Yeah,
is,
absolutely.
and we actually shortened that route way down just to get that fiber there so we could keep going with that fiber project because we have a big plan. If you look at Clark's addition down there to be able to move a lot of things around.
Okay.
Great thought though.
Okay, next.
I had a question from last board meetings report, or maybe the one before. You mentioned looking at how we allocate different new builds in terms of rate categories. Has any action been taken on that? Like, for example, if you're putting in 600 amp service, does that automatically now bump you up to commercial tariff?
We've had that discussion as part of commenting on the rate tariff, but we really need to hold a meeting on that, and we haven't had that yet.
Okay, and then just for context, I see the decision to underground all new connections going forward. In the tariff section, there's a little language around flexibility. If you're located, for instance, in an urban downtown that has no tree cover, is the intent to still require those facilities to underground, even if they're in a very low risk area?
Right now, we are looking at, if we're looking at actively burying projects that are currently overhead, I just don't want to put any more underground in. If it makes sense, or any more overhead in, I'm sorry. If we get in a situation where it makes sense to look at overhead, we would probably still do it, but it would be on an exception basis rather than on, right now, the way the tariff is written is it's an exception, but we've been allowing it without really making any exceptions. We've just, if the situation where the trees do not exist, because that's what the tariff particularly addresses. If we don't have trees, we just allow it without any discussion. And I think we really need to, before we put any more poles in, we really need to look at our long range plan of whether there's a project to rebuild a circuit. And if that's the case, then we probably don't want to be adding overhead.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand, but I also paid underground about 50 feet when I built my new house last year, and that cost $6,000. So I could see this potentially for people with properties that are larger and they would need to, typically extend poles. This might make it prohibitive for them to connect, which I just think it's something that we should all be aware of as a board.
I definitely understood. The majority of the work that we do is underground, but we do overhead extensions. And typically it's more in Jackson County and maybe West Grand. Typically the stuff that we do with the large homes down here in Grand County ends up being underground anyway.
When I read that tariff, I just thought that, react like the only thing that causes fires are trees. And, a line goes down or someone knocks a line into an urban area onto a dumpster or onto shrubs that are dry, and it's a windy day, we're off to the races. I think Eastern Colorado had a good wake up call maybe 4 or 5 years ago that wildfire burned through that open land that doesn't have a lot of trees, and it was terrifying for people, and a bunch of houses were lost. Moves really fast. So I think, broadening that a little bit as far as, when we talk about what's exceptions and what's not, we broaden our perspective on what can burn. But when I read it, I did think about, there may be line extensions that cross railroads or streets, and that may create impediments as well to undergrounding. I don't know, but so long as you guys have some flexibility, I'm okay with you moving a bit more towards the less exceptions on this. I mean, we're spending a lot of money to try to underground our system. it only makes sense to try to get the line, you know, as much undergrounded as possible.
Yeah, and as Don will attest to as well, we've had a lot of wildlife encounters this year that we have not typically had in past years due to migration patterns changing with the East Troublesome Fire. And we've had a lot of outages in places where we never used to have outages due to wildlife. And we've also had situations where there've been grass fires or sagebrush areas that we've started some, I don't want to say that, but we've had some issues with that as well related to the facilities, lines dropping on the ground, those types of things. So we're just trying to build a good, reliable system that in the future, if we're going to rebuild or if we're going to bury facilities, we shouldn't be building newer facilities that then we have to turn around and bury.
Quick question, is it our legal responsibility? So if a member pays for a line extension, are they also responsible for keeping that clear and maintaining that since they invested in that, or does that become our responsibility?
It's our responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
We're talking line extension versus from the pedestal to the house.
Yeah, well, it would be both, but I mean, if you're on a pedestal, it's already underground, you're going to be going underground to the house as well. Okay.
Any other questions for Scott?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Sir. Don.
You need to unmute yourself, Don.
You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, but I kind of like just talking to the clear blue air. And good morning, everybody. Does anybody have any questions on my report?
Well, it looks like you got off easy.
Wow.
Thank you. Stacy.
Stacy is not on right now, so I would suggest that we move on to Joe.
Okay. You.
Good morning, everyone. If there's any questions about my report, I'll take those now. Just one thing I was planning to report on additionally. I thought I was going to report on supply chain issues, getting current transformers, but I just was informed at the start of this meeting that we are going to get our order. We were originally going to get an order in November, but it was pushed off until February from the manufacturer. And then we got notice this morning that they said that they will be able to deliver our order within 7 days. So no need to report. If there's any other questions, let me know those.
I have a question on these authentication fobs for two-step verification or multi-factor authentication.
Sure.
Why the fobs and why not just like the system that a lot of other institutions are using that send a text to your phone or something like that?
Well, so we have some positions where they don't have a company cell phone, and there's difficulty in requiring them to provide a personal cell phone for us to authenticate to.
Okay.
The fobs are pretty cheap now. They used to be very expensive, but now they're under $30 a piece, and last for years. So I thought it was just the easiest, simplest, and most cost-effective way to go about it.
Okay. As long as someone doesn't lose that fob.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Liz, did you have something?
Jill may have answered it. I was just curious about like in the budget, in the bills for payment, there was a reference to light something. Anyway, I was just curious about the supply chain issues as it relates to the backbone and getting our facilities hooked to the backbone. Does that look like that's going to be an issue, or are we looking good?
No, we actually purchased the equipment last January. And so we don't have it physically here, but it is sitting at Light River's facility, waiting for a few variables to get worked out once the final design and installation is done for them to finish configuring it. So we're just waiting to take delivery of the material, of the electronics, for phase one anyway.
Good timing. Good
Yeah,
job.
we got lucky on that one. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Back with us.
Stacy, you ready to go?
I am, yeah.
All right,
So,
floor's yours.
okay. So I submitted my board report, talked a little bit about Donna and I going through the budget and working through different things to see if we could look at saving money on any of the items, and we will continue to do our due diligence with bidding and getting the best prices that we can. And then we will tackle what all of you had requested and look at putting something more formal together. We do a lot behind the scenes with NISC, an upgrade and a really awesome feature is a new fleet management program that we have currently. And with that, I mean, we take every single little expense and, oops, I should get this on. Nobody's in my office, but take every single little expense, and whether it's, you know, an oil change and the oil we buy for it, the fuel, what job it's going to, we track all those per vehicle, and we're looking at mileage, and we're getting some pretty nice reports now. And Dawn had access to one of those and many of them, and the mechanics are on board with using fleet management. I actually just went to a class 2 weeks ago just to look at how to extrapolate more data and how it works with our assets. So it was a really good class, and we've got some nicer features that we will be able to show you all here. So I'm pretty excited to show that off. So that was one thing I had put in my board report. Any other questions about my report for me?
At the last meeting, we were told we were going to get a kind of detailed description of what was going on with that discrepancy where a member perhaps wasn't billed. Is that going to be covered in executive session or elsewhere?
Yes, yes. Yep, all members were billed, so that was good. There was a discrepancy in how we found it and going back, but I'll go into further detail in executive session. So yes, as you will see on my report, we did make that adjustment. So we added in, we didn't have a meter, like I had told you, I think in the previous board meeting, we don't have a meter, so we don't have a direct meter read in. We were able to bill them. But what Liz had pointed out was the bill was really large and it didn't match the kilowatt hours. So because it's a manual process and we use a lot of reports to verify all our data, the revenue was in there, but the kilowatt hours weren't in there correctly. So we manually updated in all the reports. Historically, those are correct. We're continuing to work on getting a meter out there and working through those issues. And then I'll talk more in detail in executive session about the particular member and what I found out and what we're going to do to prevent any possibility of not being able to catch when we don't have a meter. And in this case, this is really our only one to be able to bill. So, yep. So reports are accurately reflected now with the kilowatt hours.
Thanks, Stacy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you as well for the demand summary. That's great information I think will be useful in the future.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I spent some time looking at the demand summary too. And then I was like, oh, I want to run my own spreadsheets and look at like, if we add in like total kilowatt hours in there. So anyway, yeah, thank you for that. And
you're welcome.
Once again, we have the margin is big.
It is. Yep. With
And
the
we're going to address that in executive session as well.
Right.
We had that discussion last month, and I think we came up with a methodology that addresses a number of the concerns that were raised last month.
Great, thank you.
Correct. Thanks, Mark. Yep.
Anything else?
Jeff,
Nancy?
This is Carl.
Go ahead.
Just a comment, number 4 on your board report about continuing to explore ways with RUS in which we are allowed to spend our money from the sale of the Winter Park property. I guess that goes back to the discussion that Mark brought up earlier of one of the best reasons to get bought out of RUS, since they are telling us how we can spend our money, which I don't think is very appropriate. Just a comment.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, exactly. I mean, we are exploring so many pros and cons with the buyout of RUS, and not just that it's complicated to have an RUS loan, because we can do complicated, and we have done complicated for a really long time and done it because of lower interest rates and for our members, and it just made sense. And now as they prohibit some of our business practices, and some of the things are being just prohibitive with us moving forward and taking too long when we need to make decisions faster. Carl, you're right. That is one of the reasons we're looking at a possible exploration of a buyout and just different alternatives. So. Any other questions?
All right. Anything else?
No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica?
First, I just wanted to give you all some feedback from employees. So generally, the NRECA insurance benefits have gone over really well this week. Thank you to Michelle for doing those presentations to our employees. Most employees are really excited to be going back to NRECA, and obviously we're excited to be offering a better plan, keeping premiums low, and then administratively it'll be a lot simpler. So I think win-win for that. I'm very thrilled. I know Michelle is too. And then I wanted to give a big thank you. It's in my report from Katie Hale at Grand Beginnings. She was so excited to get the funding from you all from the education fund and to be able to use that for some childcare needs in our community. So just wanted to pass that along. Any questions on my report?
So people like the bonus too?
Yes, and actually I was going to talk about that in executive session.
But it was very well received.
Very well.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Good morning, everybody. Just a couple updates to my report. The level 3 electric vehicle charger in Grand Lake, I understand as of yesterday, has been energized. The level 2 chargers out at the Winter Park Ski Resort, we have 14 chargers going out. There's basically 1 bay for every 2 chargers. So there's a total of 7 bays. 3 of those bays are indoors, 4 are outdoors. The 3 in the indoor parking lot are installed and energized, and 2 of the 4 in the parking lot outdoors, which is near the gondola tubing hill, have been installed. So that's exciting news, a project long time in the making that we worked with Tri-State to accomplish. So very excited about that. So I just wanted to add, those are the 2 main things as an update to my board report, but I will entertain any questions you might come up with.
What's the timing on the Tri-State heat tape load control technology. I just had a.
Yeah, so Liz, that was something our relationship manager mentioned to me at the October communications conference, and as something that he's just starting to work on, and asked me if we would have any interest in it, and I told him absolutely we would. So I'm waiting to hear more details on that, and as they become available, I will certainly update you on that and let you know if that's something we can be part of.
Okay, that'd be great. I just had an inquiry and about, someone who wants to do that very thing. And I'm like, do I tell them to get a hold of you or just sit tight or just call their own electrician? And
I don't have any of the details on how the program will work.
Okay.
I think there is a single technology software platform that they're planning on using, but I don't know which one it is and how it works. But I will find out what I can and get you that information as soon as I know.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So actually on that topic, that reminds me of something that I meant to bring up. The latest building codes in Grand County and some of the towns actually require heat tape to be on timers. And it seems like a good opportunity for us to work with some of our local. Who installs heat tape? Is it is it typically an electrician or is it just like a general maintenance person?
Or the roofer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know exactly the breakdown, Kristen, but I think it is a variety of, can be the roofer, can be the builder, can be the homeowner afterwards, dealing with ice dams, calling people, sometimes electricians.
But it seems like there's just generally a lack of awareness about this provision in the building codes. So it might be an opportunity for us to do a little bit of member engagement and education around that. Because if heat tape is hitting us on our peak, it's more expensive than it could be if it was on a timer and not doing that.
Absolutely. What we've run into with energy audits is, a number of the homeowners associations don't allow their tenants to ever turn off the heat tape. And some years ago, that was even including the summer months. So this building code update that you're talking about, was it adopted by Fraser or Winter Park or both? Do you know?
No, it's the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code, which I believe the county is now on, and Fraser Winter Park may have updated to 2018, but that provision is still in. So I'll get the language from that and I'll just send it around so we can make people aware.
Okay.
I would say that
Kristen, one thing to think about too is on that is as you're looking at that language, is that heat tape is at least the new generation stuff, and it's been out for a while, is self-regulating. I mean, it'll vary on what it's pulling in amperage, depending on, what those temperatures are in the roof and certain sections of the tape as well. So if you have something that's buried in ice, it's going to keep going. But if there's another same section, same circuit, that portion will self-regulate somewhat. So I don't know if that is if that's addressed by when you say timer. I wonder if that would be the same thing. I don't know.
That's a good question. I mean, we didn't do heat tape because we had the metal roof and big eaves and guards, but it's just something to look at.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, the people I talked to said, you can see if you look at their smart hub use, you can see how the heat tape affects it because they don't have any electrical heat load or electric hot water heater or anything like that. But their heat tape installer, who I think also was the roofer and the person who did the gutters, said this is as efficient as it gets. It's on a thermostat, but as they pointed out, if it's 10 degrees, but it hasn't snowed and there's no snow on the roof, the heat tape still runs. And so, they're trying to figure that out. And I mean, there's a lot of opportunity if that hits us on the peak and they don't need it on, or in the event that we really have an emergency and we need to shed load, it'd be very interesting to know how many megawatts of heat tape we have especially in the Fraser Winter Park end. It could get shut off for an hour.
Agree.
Anything else, Rob?
Nothing for me.
Any other questions for Rob? Okay, thank you, sir.
And I apologize, bills for payment. If you update your call to order, they are up there now. That was completely my fault. Diane got them to me. But if you refresh your November agenda, they'll pop up.
Basically, just touch the little house.
Heat tape's 5 to 8 watts per foot typically, I think. Jeff can correct me if that's
6. Yeah, it is 6 watts per foot for the most part. Adds up quick. Well, I'm glad to see the bills for payment are not coming up on my computer, so it's not my favorite part anyway. So let's move on. If they come up, we'll get back to them. But why's that coming up there?
It's actually the little circle, Jeff, to the left. The little semicircle arrow that you hit.
I was just trying not to get, I was just trying to get through bills for payment. Didn't want to do it. And it just updated. All right. Any questions on the bills for payment?
Liz, you're muted.
You're still muted, Liz.
They've come up on mine
Yep.
and I moved to accept them.
I don't think we typically do a motion, do we?
Do we?
No,
I
you
don't
just
think
have
so.
questions. If there are any questions, and then you move on to the board forum. So it appears you have no questions, and you can move on to your favorite thing, Jeff, the forum.
All right. Liz, you got anything?
Just that the Green Power meeting that would have been this Tuesday has been postponed until next Monday. And that Green Power had a good conversation with Rob, and will be, they're just looking at how they might expand donations to the program and get the public more involved. And because of COVID, you know, some of the ideas haven't happened. But they will eventually, there'll be a meeting. I think that'll be discussed more on Monday, and then they will send any sort of proposal that they have to encourage donations to Mark and for his review.
You've got some people coming off that board.
Right. We have 2 people coming off, Steve Meyer and Barbara Amstutz. So that's your area, Jeff, and Mark Volt's area. And I think it would be nice, and I know we have people coming off the Charitable Trust Board. I think it would be nice if this board acknowledged service on our committees and sent them a note thanking them.
Is that something you'd be willing to put together, Liz?
Yeah, but I might need some help. I mean, if we're going to acknowledge the Charitable Trust folks, we need something for that too.
Casey would be happy to help you with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Thanks.
Liz, one more question. When do those people come off those boards? I mean, what kind of replacement?
Steve and Lynn's meeting, this will be their last meeting. Steve's undergoing, I don't know if he's going to be able to be at this meeting.
Okay.
And then the Green Power won't meet until January, I think. We meet quarterly. So.
Okay.
That's the same with ours too. I had Barb and Deb. Deb's moving and Barb is going to Arizona now, more full-time, and they just attended their last meeting as well. And we don't meet again until January.
Casey, do you have any people that are wanting to serve, or would you like me to figure out Barb's replacement?
Deb and Barb both submitted a couple suggestions, as did Kristen.
Okay.
So I have all those we had some issues with membership and joint membership, so we're working on to make sure everybody's allowed to serve on the board.
Okay,
So I will bring those to the next board meeting. Hopefully we can get everything resolved. Yeah. I think there was about 5 replacements for 3 spots, so the board has to approve them for our I'll say bylaws, but
Okay. Dick, you got anything?
no. No, they're,
Justin? Kristen? Mr. Volt, you got anything? Who am I missing? Oh, Carl. Carl, what do you got? You there?
Well, we had a tri-state meeting November 1st. A couple things to report. Elevated cases of COVID is causing a mass mandate at tri-state headquarters. 28 days of lockdown, so we're hoping we can have a in-person meeting in December, but not sure. E&O committee, Brad reported that we're running the gas plants more now, even with high gas prices, which is not caused at this point by the intermittent supply of renewables, but the high price of power. They are running the gas plants because they are selling power off peak at $80 a megawatt hour. There's a private ranch, nonprofit in Laramie called 9H Ranch that is building a one-half megawatt solar facility under a 115 contract, and Carbon and Power and Light is buying the output, and it's the first 115 contract in Wyoming. The budget was presented. Long-term debt forecast is reduced to $2.6 billion by 2024. The patronage capital, Pat explained whether we give 10 or 30 million won't make a difference. The board will vote in December. Finance committee, crypto market going to propose a special rate to a miner in Wyoming to use Laramie River Station power through High West Energy Co-op. And
What do you mean a minor?
That was
like underage? What do you mean by a minor?
No,
Like
crypto.
Oh, okay.
Crypto
Okay, mining
crypto miner.
cryptocurrency. Got it.
Yes, mining cryptocurrency.
Okay.
There was a lot of discussion at the board about the ability for these miners to just up and move and how this would do it. But anyway, they're going to propose a special rate to the miner and use the LRS power, which Tri-State is forecasting to not be available in the future because of Colorado not wanting to import coal power from out of state. So the board approved it. And Dwayne's report, one of his biggest issues was that he is fearful of the vaccine mandate from Biden. Some of the staff has already said they will leave. IT department is the most vulnerable because they believe they can work from remotely, as Kristen brought up earlier. No rules at the meeting date had been proposed. but since that time, OSHA had come out with a rule, and then the Federal Appeals Court turned down that rule, so I don't know what the status of that is now. So that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Hey, Carl, was there any discussion of the, I think it's like 9 billion debt relief for co-ops that's still under discussion, or you guys wait until that passes?
Well, Barbara brought that up, yes, and the reconciliation bill, of course, is still under consideration, so I don't think it's still in the bill as far as we know, but, you know, what happens to that is up in the air.
Yep.
I thought there were some funds in the BIF that had to do with stranded coal assets.
In the infrastructure bill or the?
Yeah, yep.
I thought that was budget reconciliation, but there definitely
I
is
think
money
there's something-
for
I'm pretty
power.
sure it was, well, I'm pretty sure it was in the infrastructure bill.
No, we should.
I'll look back and see.
Yeah, we should look that up.
Well, to my knowledge, there is nothing in the infrastructure bill about debt relief for stranded assets. It's all in the reconciliation bill. So that's my understanding, and, you know, don't take me as an expert on that, but that's my understanding.
Okay. Anybody else got anything? I don't have anything from CREA. We do have a meeting in December. Mark, do we have any, we don't have any emergency business, do we?
No, we do not.
Do we have any old business?
Not that I'm aware of.
Any new business?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do we have a need for a services meeting?
I'm aware,
Okay.
not that I'm aware of.
Okay, unless I missed something, we're down to executive session.
Yes, and the 7 topics that are listed there are the ones that we would discuss, and I would suggest combining 1 and 2 and moving those to the end of the executive session.
Did we have anything we needed to add before we had, so somebody could make that motion, or is it just 7?
I didn't have anything specific. I mean, we talked about a couple of things that if board members had questions, we could discuss in executive session, but I don't believe that there's anything else unless a board member has a specific question that they would like to add that topic to the agenda.
Okay. Can somebody take a stab at that motion, include those 7 items?
Go ahead, Dick, you're not muted.
All right, make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters and attorney-client privilege matters. I believe that would cover everything.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second.
Before you vote, I think Bryson might have a comment. He unmuted himself.
Sorry, Justin.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bryson.
I think the motion should either include a list of the matters or just simply say the matters listed on the agenda for discussion, because the motion should have the topics of discussion as well.
I'll amend my motion to include the following: personnel matters, general manager review, employee housing, service restoration, power supply litigation, proposed order, and member revenue discussion.
Thanks, Dick.
Thanks, Nick. You have a second? Thanks, Mark. You got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?